So welcome to the Center for the Blue Economy speaker series, which coincides with the Environmental Justice and Sustainability speaker series. We're so glad to have all of our students here, first-year students who are studying the International Environmental Policy Program with an ocean focus. We're so glad to have all of our interpreting students here who are silent booth interpreting tonight. And we're glad to have our speaker, Dr. Juliano Calil. But before we introduce our speaker, and Jason, I'll have you do that. It's 6 o'clock, oh my gosh. We'd like to start, as is our tradition, which this was prompted by our students, with a land acknowledgement. So we start today by acknowledging that we're physically meeting in the indigenous tribal area known as the Achasta. This is the area of the city of Monterey, California. And this is the home of the First Nations Ohlone, Costanoan, Esselen, also known as the Carmeleno, Monterey Band, the Rumsen, the Chalon, Ohlone and Costanoan. These are the indigenous people of Monterey County. All enrolled tribal members have their ancestors identified in the San Carlos de Borromeo de Carmelo mission and Nuestra Senora de la Soledad mission in their original records. We acknowledge the tribal government. We respect their spiritual roles today, their cultural heritage and leadership roles as living Ohlone, Costanoan, Esselen First Nations people. Thank you, everyone. We welcome everyone. And Jason, I would like to turn it to you to introduce our speaker. Jason is the director of the Center for the Blue Economy.
Thank you, Rachel, and good to see everybody. So yeah, Juliano has been with the center and as an adjunct professor here at the Institute for a number of years, co-teaches the Sustainable Coastal Management with Dr. Zarski, who I see is in attendance. That's great. And Juliano, has been doing some amazing stuff with technology and virtual reality on climate adaptation, some really cutting edge stuff, and really haven't touched base with you in a while on your updates. So I feel like I'll get the latest and the greatest as well. So we always love highlighting really cool, new, innovative, cutting edge things, especially for climate adaptation in coastal zones. And Juliano is absolutely at the forefront of that. So welcome, Dr. Calil, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. Great to see you. Hey, Luba. Big hello to you. Let me share here. And all right. So give just a second for all the bars to go away. All right. Are we good, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay.
Bars has disappeared.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Jason. Thanks, Rachel. It's great to be here for this again. Let's dive just right in. So first, before I even start, I'd just like to acknowledge it really does take a village to do this application that I'm going to share with you today. And that's one of the things I really love about this work is really the different partnerships and how multidisciplinary the teams are. We have folks we even have a psychologist now that joined the team, which has been great. We have screenwriters, city planners, and residents of this great communities. So it's been really, really great to work with them. And one of the big things I'm going to tell you or talk to you about today is how we tell stories, and specifically about climate change, right? So this is one way. This is a IPCC assessment report number 6, AR6, that came out a few weeks ago. This chart, it was in a report that came out last week, even when they're talking about different potential futures, right? So there's a lot going on. I'm not going to get into a lot of details on this, but this is the number to watch for here, right? So these are the 5 scenarios that they're proposing as potential futures. And if all countries meet their Paris Agreement pledges, it turns out we're heading to roughly 2.7 degrees Celsius of warming by the end of the century, right? And with the climate, with that much change, and we're already seeing some of these things today, we're seeing more intense and frequent intense storms. 2020 was a record-breaking year. It looks like every year now we're breaking all these records. So we had 30 named storms and 14 hurricanes, which was the highest number ever recorded. We had this amazing heat waves, the Pacific Northwest, Portland, 116 degrees, and hundreds of people died in that disaster. And then they had these cooling centers everywhere. And of course, we're talking about these wildfires and droughts, and it's kind of everywhere. And the way we talk about some of these issues today, and specifically, and that's how we kind of started looking at sea level rise and coastal erosion and some other things, is through a Google Maps image like this. When you look down, and it's a 2D image, and the blue area is trying to depict some sort of coastal risks here and flooding. But I have a friend that every time she sees images like this, she says, "Oh, we're not birds, right? We're not used to looking at things from the top like that." Because it's kind of hard to relate to some of the features and really understand and grasp what's happening. And there's growing evidence that this kind of communications are not super effective. So last year, I stumbled upon this great research from two professors from Georgia State University, Riza Palm and Toby Boson, where they interviewed 1,000 residents in Florida. And they showed images such as the one I just showed you to some of the residents and not to others. And surprisingly, they found that the residents that looked at those images were less likely to accept that climate was changing, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. And across the political spectrum, they didn't think that climate and sea level rise was going to affect their property values. And of course, we know there's evidence already that things are already affecting, there's some, not everywhere, right? There's some, there was an interesting article from the CEO of Zillow a few weeks ago, kind of showing that, people are still buying houses on at-risk places, but at least in some areas in Miami, house prices are not keeping up as much, when they're on the flood zone or at more risk of flooding. So what I'm going to show you now is just a little clip of the things that we've been doing for the last, I think, year and a half. And then I'm going to show and talk to you about each one of these projects, and then we'll have a conversation about them.
The burning of coal, oil, and natural gas all produce greenhouse gas that forms a blanket around the Earth.
This blanket traps heat, causing global temperatures to rise, but also cause glaciers and ice sheets to melt, seawater to expand, which both raise sea levels.
Sea level rise could change coastal cities permanently. We must make tough decisions now.
Out there through the trees, something has sparked a flame, and it's starting to spread fast. Wildfires represent an increasing danger due to our planet's warming climate and changing rainfall patterns.
Hi friends! I'm so happy you're here. My name is Marina, and I will be taking you on an adventure today. Let's say hello to my good friend the elephant seal. Hi, Angus. It feels great to be underwater.
Hi, I'm Derek. I was born here and have lived my whole life in the city everyone calls Cleveland. I would love to ride my bike more, especially during the good weather, but I'm not so sure it is the best idea because it's so hot. I wish we had more bike lanes and shade, but we don't. Man, it is so hot today.
All right. So these are some of the experiences that we're developing with great partners. I'm very excited. A couple of those, you're actually the first folks to see them. They're just fresh from the oven. The marine protected areas and the Cleveland experience are brand new. They haven't even been released yet. They're coming up soon. But before I talk some of the details of these projects, I just want to kind of explain a little bit, why are we talking about these immersive solutions, right? And by immersive, we mean we're doing virtual reality. We bring headsets to these events and really immerse people in some of these environments. And there are a few reasons. One is that VR really tricks your brain. It's really weird, but even though you're sitting at your home or you're at a library and you have a headset on, and if you see that you're flying on a blimp looking down in the Santa Cruz main beach, if you're a little afraid of height, for instance, your palms will sweat, your heart will beat a little faster. So physiologically, you react as what you're seeing, as if what you're seeing is real. There's some emerging evidence that VR experiences and immersive experiences promote pro-social behavior change. They also increase preparation for natural disasters and also people's intent to evacuate from flood-prone areas and to purchase flood insurance. And also there's some emerging research showing that interactive images, they're more effective in risk communication, and they can even weaken science politicization, which is a huge problem today, right? And the other thing is that it's still pretty new. It's a novel approach. So every time we do one of these experiences, we end up getting great kind of media coverage. These are some of the big ones. There's a great article on NPR about one of our projects on Morning Edition. It was a great piece. And then also in other areas, but we also get a lot of like local media, which is, I even get more excited about the local media because that's what get the residents to show up and come up to some of the events and get engaged. And we published a paper I think it's like maybe 3 months ago on water, where we kind of summarized some of the findings from 3 of our papers. We did a really great lit review. There's a paper with about 7 authors. There was a team from Stanford from the Virtual Human Interaction Lab that joined us in that paper, and also 3 leaders from Santa Cruz, Long Beach, and Turner Station. So our project partners on the ground were co-authors, and they wrote kind of pieces of the case studies. So it's a really great intro and kind of overview on how we've been using VR and sea level rise and community engagement. And this is Santa Cruz, so one of the projects that we talked about in the paper. Let me show you a quick clip here of some of the visuals. This is, you see an aerial view from a drone shot that goes into the app, and now you're inside this virtual room. And so you can look around in all directions, and we have this 3D models inside in VR, and then you slide the bar, and then you can see the waters kind of rising real time. And then now you can see the roller coaster very clearly. You can see the residents, you can see some of the buildings. So it's a lot easier to relate to what you're seeing. And then when you see this in virtual reality, where if you look to the right, you continue to see the coast in all directions, it's really more impactful. And one of the things that Rachel mentioned is that we're on environmental justice focus as well. So one of the things that became very clear here for the folks that know Santa Cruz, this area is the Beach Flats neighborhood, which is the most socially vulnerable in the whole county of Santa Cruz and really across our entire West Coast, where it's a low-income community as well that's smacked down into the most vulnerable low-lying area in the county, right? So we had this experience at the Santa Cruz Public Library for about 10 weeks, right before the pandemic hit. And we had over 400 people that they would just go in, check out the headsets, go through the experience. And they also answered a quick questionnaire. And about 77% of the people that went through the experience declared a significant increase in their awareness of sea level rise. The next project I'm going to talk a little bit about is the Sea Level Rise Explorer in Long Beach. This is a project we did in a partnership with the Nature Conservancy and the Aquarium of the Pacific. And really the whole goal of the project was to have a discussion with the community to say, what could be done in the area so residents and businesses could stay where they are for as long as possible, right? As you see some of the images here, and this is some of the visuals. This is an aerial view of the Long Beach Peninsula. It's just south of Los Angeles. Super low lying, very, very vulnerable, already floods today. And as you're gonna see, with less than a foot of sea level rise, this whole back area gets inundated. With a 100-year storm today, most of it gets flooded as well. And with 4.9 projected sea level rise for that area, you can see the houses are permanently inundated as well. So we developed this experience and we brought that to events at the Aquarium of the Pacific. There's another thing that we found, that you can't see what you're going to see now in static 2D images, right? If you see the beach is kind of at the south area here at the bottom. So, and the bay is on the top. So I'm going to play this again, and you can see that the flooding comes from the top, right? From the bay. So even if you wanted to build a giant seawall here to protect the front homes, the water would just go around the river and flood things anyways. So we had a series of meetings where we started this conversation, and the whole idea of this project was to set up a series of conversations and meetings to talk about climate impacts and sea level rise that would include not only mid and short-term solutions, but also long-term approaches, right? And in this case, there's not the long-term. We brought in a design school from Pasadena, and they did a semester. They were kind of designing different ways and how they could see Long Beach, by the end of the century. And there was this kind of very futuristic giant seawalls and floating cities and things like that. But in reality, it's going to be really, really expensive to maintain this in the long run. This is one of the images that we created. This is not a real image. This is rendering what sand dunes could look like with beach nourishment. So you start to see some of these options, and when you're looking at that in VR, it looks really real, and then you can maybe look at some of the options, but also some trade-offs, right, for what could be done, comparing different options. This was one of our community meetings. This is my colleague, Elisa Mann from the Nature Conservancy. Here in the corner, it's kind of hard to see, but this is Jerry Schubel. He was the president of the Aquarium of the Pacific. He's now retired. But one of the key things that we're finding across all these experiences is that really having a local trusted resident and community leader makes all the difference, right? It's very similar with environmental justice. And, when you start to work at the speed of trust with these new partners, who is in the room and who's talking, who's delivering the message makes a huge difference, right? If I come in and I start talking about sea level rise in some of these places, I don't live there. I have kind of a funny accent. So it's like, people won't take me as seriously as they will when Jerry is standing up and say, hey, we have a problem. Here are some people that they're going to come and talk to you. So it really helps in creating that rapport, but also bringing people to the meetings and adding, some validity to the project and credibility to some of the things that we're doing. We also had an artist that did this great mural that was kind of tracking the meeting as we went through, really with this idea, what could be done to keep everyone there for as long as possible. So I think I have a little clip here of the end of the experience. One other thing, I made a little list here of all the people that narrate our experiences. So Santa Cruz, we had Gary Griggs, he's a professor here at UC Santa Cruz. A local icon here in sea level rise and the coastal geology here in California. One of the narrators for a couple other experiences, and you see here in Long Beach, is Christina Oraftic. She was actually an alumna from this. So she was participating in the project with the Nature Conservancy, and she was kind enough to agree to do the narration, and it came out great. But we also have in the Spanish version of all our tools, and we have Ernestina Saldaña. She's a local activist here in Santa Cruz. The experience in Cleveland is for a local teenager called Abdullah Madera. Joel Hirsch did Santa Cruz. He's a local here in Santa Cruz as well. Emily is the voice of Marina that you guys heard. She works for Save Our Shores, Emily Pomeroy. So we try to work with local folks as much as possible.
The burning of coal, oil, and natural gas all produce greenhouse gases that form a blanket around the Earth, which can intensify severe weather patterns, but also cause glaciers and ice sheets to melt, seawater to expand, which both raise sea levels. These changes will create major disruptions for our planet and impact coastal communities in many ways. See that water filling in? Long Beach will experience rising sea levels, beach erosion, and eventually permanent inundation by ocean waters in some areas. There are some things we can do in the near term to keep people in their homes as long as possible without limiting our options for the future. However, this solution would not provide protection long term. As sea levels continue to rise, low-lying areas may be permanently underwater. Welcome to the Sea Level Rise Explorer.
Right, so that was the Long Beach project. One of the things that I do have to say is that these tools have been great to start conversations and to get people engaged and show up and sign up for events and come to the community meetings and whatnot. But I like to say always that this is not just about the technology. It's really important that all these projects that you're seeing have an on-the-ground component, so people have a place to go. They can talk to someone after they go through these experiences, because these are people that live in these houses, right? It's not just so we have to be very mindful and careful on how we deliver these things. And a couple of things. One is that folks that live in the areas that they see have much stronger emotional reactions to some of the things as expected, right? So the next project I'm going to talk about
The
is
burning of
a project in Turner Station in Maryland. This was actually our first project. This is a community just outside of Baltimore, and it's kind of low income, mostly African American. And this gentleman here on the right is Larry Bannerman. I met with him when I was out there taking some of the drone shots that we use to develop these tools. And Larry got super involved with the project, so much so that he became the narrator for the experience. He has a great voice. I have a little clip for you to hear him. But he bought a headset and he takes it to his friends and he goes like, hey, watch this. And they put the clip on their website for the Turner Station conservation teams, and they're looking at the spark. So let me give you a little taste of Larry.
Turner Station has been home to an amazing array of achievers: military heroes, jazz greats, athletes, educators, a congressman, an astronaut, and many more notables.
So that was one of the great things about this experience, is that we talk about the community. There's some images of some photographs from some of the residents. And this is just to give some context where it is, just outside of Baltimore and the Chesapeake Bay. And the goal of this, let me play this little video, it was totally focused on this park. This is their senior center here for the community. It's called Fleming Park. So we were doing, we did the experience, Neri does the narration. The virtual room in this is actually the lunch room in the senior center. And I sent this out to an artist. We look at some of the 2D models. This is based on NOAA's sea level rise viewer projections up to 6 feet of sea level rise, which, by the way, the high tide projections for 2100 in this area is between 5 and 6 feet, like just at high tide without any storm surge or anything. But I talk about some of the emotional reactions from VR just a minute ago. And to me, when I got this image back, I sent it to our artist, and then he did the rendering, came back, and I put the headsets on, and I'm looking down and I look at the park and it looks great. I mean, it doesn't look great, but it looks very realistic. But then I looked to the right and I saw the houses here. And that was, I still kind of feel that same emotion talking about this. It was like getting hit in the stomach, like a punch in the gut. Because it's like, here we are doing all this project talking about the spark, and the idea here was to bring dredged materials from the port of Baltimore and maybe lay it around the bay here and create some sort of a living shoreline and plant new trees to protect the park. But we're not at the time talking about the residents in the community. So the app was used by the Nature Conservancy and some partners to raise some funds, and they're actually now talking about that, which has been really great. So I was very happy that the first time I actually left California after the pandemic was to visit Turner Station again, to basically kick off phase 2 of the project, that now we're actually talking about the residents and the homes. You can see the park there in the back, but now the focus is on the residents. This gentleman here is Michael. He spent one afternoon with me. We're flying the drones and getting some of the images to do the 3D models and some of these renderings. And Michael lives, let me show you here, in this little house here just by the pond here on the top right of the screen. And he tells me the story of one hurricane where he actually got woken up by the firefighters knocking at his door because his car was about to start floating away from his home. And you can see how low-lying this is. This whole side of the neighborhood doesn't even have storm drains because it's so flat and low-lying. So there's no, in the infrastructure, we had a meeting with the Army Corps to understand a little bit more. This is designed to withstand a 10-year event, which happens, every few months now during some high tide, or if it gets windy or too windy some days, the streets start to flood. So I'm very happy that now we're talking about this. We're going to look at some scenarios and help them to create some of these visuals to try to apply for bigger grants to do some adaptation options there in the neighborhood. So we've been working with the Sea Level Rise Explorer for the last 2.5 years, roughly. So I showed you a little bit about Turner Station, Santa Cruz, Long Beach. We also have a great experience about the Elkhorn Slough, very close to Monterey. I'll send you links to all of this so you can try them on your own. You can do that There are phone apps, there are web-based apps. If you have a VR headset, you can look at that in VR. So we're trying to democratize this as much as possible. And we're currently working on a project with Santa Barbara at Goleta Beach. We're, as I mentioned, Turner Station Phase 2. We also just finished a project with Huntington Beach, looking at the power plant. And we're kicking off a project in Florida soon. And just this, some of you may recognize Goleta Beach here on this little loop. Just on a word of caution, this is the Santa Barbara airport, so don't try this at home. It took us about 3 months negotiating the permits to fly the drones near the airport, FAA and the airport. So it was kind of a hard process, but we got through. But yeah, if you're starting to play with drones, be very mindful of airspace restrictions and safety. Shifting gears a little bit, last year we had some time and some extra funds that came through one of the projects, and we decided to do a kind of basically reinvest everything, and we did a pro bono project. This was about the campfire, and it's called the Wildfire Explorer. It was a partnership with the Nature Conservancy again and the Paradise Recreation and Parks District. So let me show you a little clip of that.
Wildfires represent an increasing danger due to our planet's warming climate and changing rainfall patterns. This experience will share the story of the most destructive and deadly wildfire in California's history and a few strategies that can help reduce fire risks at our communities in the future. Welcome to the Wildfire Explorer. It's great to have you here.
So this experience, let me, I'm gonna hop windows here. Hopefully this will work. I just wanna show you, and I'll post the link. I think it's on the page of this event. Actually, the link to this full film is there. This is a 360 film. If you're not used to it, the way this works, you just click with your mouse and you can drag it around and then you can see all around you. I'll just play the first scene. Just a quick warning. This is, if you've been through a recent wildfire, just you might not want to look at this, or there's some folks that these are very traumatizing events. But part of the conversation at the community was about the scene. After we finished it, we had this debate: should we show this to local residents? And the consensus was that was not a good idea to do that. But they really want us to keep this, because unless you've been in one of those crazy violent events, it's really hard to imagine what these fires are like when how fast they go, where they're burning like football fields per second. It's really hard to fathom. So I'll show you this first little clip here.
Welcome to the Wildfire Explorer. It's great to have you here. Following a familiar warming trend, August of 2020 was California's warmest on record. In early September, more than 3 million acres in the state had burned, and more than 14,000 firefighters were on the line of 29 major wildfires. 2018 was one of the worst years for wildfires in California's history. More than 1 million acres burned, and more than 100 people have died. Touch the virtual planet hologram to start the experience. Out there through the trees, something has sparked a flame, and it's starting to spread fast. With this dry forest, there's abundant fuel to carry the flames, and with strong winds, the trees themselves will quickly catch fire. Under these conditions, a wildfire is incredibly difficult to contain and can quickly become an extremely dangerous firestorm. Wildfires represent an increasing danger due to our planet's warming climate and changing rainfall patterns. This experience will share the story of the most destructive and deadly wildfire in California's history and a few strategies that can help reduce fire risks at our communities in the future.
So that's the first scene. I'm going to skip ahead just to show you, give you a quick flavor of the rest of it, but I encourage you to watch it on your own if you're interested in this. But this is a 3D model of the Butte County, where the fire started here, and then you can see
to see a simulation of that tragic day's events. This wildfire, infamously known as the Camp Fire, was the costliest and most deadly in the history of the state.
All right, just to give you an idea of how crazy this was, we were, when we did this first simulation, we were seeing things like the fire wasn't connected. It's hard to kind of tricky to get to the right spot, but if you look at here, this area caught on fire before this area did, and we thought this was wrong, but it turned out no, that the wind was so violent that some of fire embers were flown away like 3 miles and starting new fires, which was part of the issue there. So we're now in conversations with the city of Santa Cruz, actually the county, and trying to see if we can find some funds to do an educational piece in VR where you put the goggles on and you see a house that's in the woods, and then you can look at ways that you can maintain the landscape around houses to protect them from wildfires, right? And okay, so now, and I think this is the last one. I think we're right on time. All right, good. This is a project we started with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. They're on the East Coast, and they approached us because they were interested in doing a project for their 75th anniversary. And they thought that maybe we could do a project around lake level rise and changes on Lake Erie in Cleveland. And then we talked to the city and the planning department, and very quickly we realized that that's not their biggest issue. Their big problem now is urban heat and transportation. So we kind of adapted the scope of the project, and then we created this experience. It's going to be a short film, about 5 minutes, talking about urban heat and some options there. So let me play this little clip here.
Hi, I'm Derek. I was born here and have lived my whole life in this city everyone calls Cleveland. But for me, it's just home. Let me show you around. This is where I take the bus to go home after school, but today I'm heading somewhere else. Have you noticed how hot Cleveland gets during the summer months?
Right now in downtown Cleveland, it's 98 degrees.
I'm thinking that if we don't do something, Cleveland will just keep getting hotter and hotter. I don't know who would want to live here if it's just as hot as Death Valley. Instead, let's imagine a different future. Whoa, that looks great, doesn't it? I know I want to keep on living here, so I'm going to learn how to help our city stay cool and be more like the forest city my abuelos remember. Hold on, I just had an idea. Why don't you come with me? Come on, it will be fun. Let's go. Let's go.
Just want to pause here in one of the scenes. And one of the things too that a couple of stories here on this experience. We actually, this is the first one when we actually hired a screenwriter to help us to write the script here and the experience, and it worked out great. And so we have the script, and then we're looking for someone local to do the voiceover. We wanted like a teenager that goes to school in the area, that lives there. And the way we wrote the story is this kid that grew up in the area, air quality is not great, so he has severe asthma. He would love to ride the bike, as you heard, but he can't because some days are too hot. There are also areas that don't have bike lanes. And then when we, through a community organization, found Abdullah Madera, he's like a third generation Puerto Rican in the area. He agreed to do the narration for us, and we met with him. And I almost end up the meeting in tears because he was telling me, he's like, hey, you guys wrote my story. It's like, I grew up here. I've been to the emergency room a bunch of times. A lot of my friends have, respiratory issues. And I don't bike, but I ride my skateboard. And even the day he was doing the recording, he said, guys, I wanted to skateboard here, but it was really too hot. So it was really, these problems are so endemic and they're so present that it's not, the chances of getting someone with those in that situation was pretty high, right? And that happened. But the other thing that was interesting too is that when we're figuring out what could we do, this is the West 25th Avenue here. It's one of the few corridors that goes through this neighborhood. So the best thing that we could come up with, and talking to city planners and other folks, is a shared bus and bike lane here. Initially, we wanted like no more cars. We're going to put cafes, and we came up with this very idyllic kind of utopian place. But the city is like, no, we're not going to do that. Even to plant all these trees, there are challenges here, right? To maintain them and Turns out Cleveland has a budget to plant, a few 100,000 trees, but they don't have space to plant those trees at. So after 1 year, they ran out because now they're looking at partnerships because the city doesn't own that much land. So they're looking at partnerships with residents and other folks. All right, so I lied. This is the last one. So Dive, an inspiring journey through California's MPAs. Let me play you this little clip as well.
Hi, friends. I'm so happy you're here. My name is Marina, and I will be taking you on an adventure today. Have you ever been to a national park, such as the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, or another? These are protected areas where some activities are limited. It turns out, we also have underwater protected areas. These are some of my favorite places to hang out. Wow, it's a giant sea bass. Let's say hello to my good friend the elephant seal. Hi, Angus. It feels great to be underwater. Great, you found a sheephead. Let's get started. Step into the submarine.
This is a great project that we're about to end. It was a great partnership with Save Our Shores. And the idea is this is going to be a class for mid-schoolers and high schoolers in California. So they actually acquired like 30 headsets. So we're going to go to the schools. There's going to be a 15 minutes class. And then within that 15 minutes, there's about 10 minutes where the kids are going to put the headsets, go through the experience. Then there's going to be an activity for them to learn about 5 concepts around MPAs, things like overfishing, spillover effects, biodiversity. And then they're going to go through the activity and learn about those things. And we're also thinking of doing some art activity afterwards so they can post some of the things online. And this is going to be available in English and Spanish. I'm Brazilian, so we went ahead and put in a Portuguese version as well. And we're going to translate all the class materials. This is all going to be available online for schools anywhere to download. So we can't wait to get schools, in the Midwest or all over the world to maybe add this to the curriculum, right? We also have some conversations with some folks that are not as into technology or, that I even had a conversation like 2 days ago. Someone said, well, but it would be much better to bring the kids to the beach, right? Why are we putting them in VRs and more screen and screen time and things like that? And I fully agree with that, except not all kids have an opportunity to get to the beach and let alone go diving and see some of the things that we're showing them. And we also work with a local company here, Oceans 360, where they have this camera that go underwater camera that records the film, so that we use here. So it's great project. Nearly done. I just wanted to put this call out in case anyone is seen here that's interesting. This is my colleague Anna. She's doing a lot of great research at the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford, and we're currently looking for partners to co-develop a little series of immersive digital stories. And the goal and the focus is on advancing climate dialogues. So the idea is to find a community where we can create a communication tool like this to bring together residents of frontline community with the decision makers, right? The people that are actually deciding and making the decisions that are going to affect what the cities are going to look like. So if you know anyone or if you're interested, email me or Anna, and then we'll be more than happy to chat with you. A few additional resources if you want to watch or participate, try the experiences. This, if we can share the slides, you can go through them on your own. Our websites, the paper that we published. There's another great paper that I came across that talks about how we should change the way we talk about climate change and tell the stories from being issue and fact-based to action-based. It's a great paper when they basically say that 98% of all stories around about the environment, 98% of them are negative. And that doesn't get people moving, really. I know there's a lot of bad things happening, but the evidence is that if you get stories about little actions that are having a positive impact, that turns into a little loop, right? What can I do tomorrow? And how's that going to make a little difference and make me feel better about that so I can keep going? And that little loop, feedback loop, is what gets people to come back and talk about these issues, because you can't just scare them into action, especially with some of these problems that are so great, they're really paralyzing, right? So with that, big thanks to Rachel and Jason for the invitation, and looking forward to some questions and conversation. Let me stop sharing here so we're back on. Oh, no, I can see you.
So much. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
people clapping. So
Oh, nice. I missed that part. Thank you.
wonderful. Yeah, if you have a question, you can use the raise hand function. You can put your question in the chat, and we'll just kind of call you out as we see your hands raised. Or all right, Maddie, you're first up. So sorry, that's my fault. I have disallowed you to unmute yourselves during the presentation. I will now allow you to unmute yourselves. Try
Amazing. Wow, I've never had that happen before. I was like, oh no. Frantically trying to type something in the chat. Thank you so much for your presentation. I had not heard of Virtual Planet before, and wow, the stuff you do is wide ranging and super emotional. Thank you. I just had a question about the Sea Level Rise Explorer, and the visuals are so unique and interesting. Does the program include like solutions or ways that we can do better?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All of them. And that's part of the package. When people sign up, we tell them we're not going to show New York City under 20 feet of water. We're going to do, all the models are based on the best available science. So we go to the USGS, to NOAA, we find what are the most recent and sound projections, and we use those. But every one of them, at the end, there are options and alternatives. It's kind of tricky because they're very limited. Everyone wants to do what is the best nature-based solution that's going to protect everyone, and nature is going to be happy, and it's going to last forever. Doesn't really work that way. There's some settings where that works, but we're looking at a lot of the places are looking at sand dunes, adding more sand to the beach, which it's expensive, it's temporary, but it does work in the short term. Some places then go on to looking at maybe build a seawall. And the problem with the seawalls is that with sea levels rise, the beach can't migrate inland, so it ends up drowning over time. So there are different things. My previous advisor, Gary Griggs, that you heard in some of the clips, he really says that the only long-term coastal adaptation is really to relocate from the coast, but that's a very controversial issue. In Long Beach, we actually spent weeks working in this amazing image, looking at the peninsula. What would it be if we restore that to a wetlands? And then when people saw that, everyone's like, oh no, we're not ready to show this. We're not ready to, we're not there yet. So we decided to not include that, but at least they saw it. There was a conversation about it, but that didn't lead to like a long-term plan. And just to finish the answer on the adaptation, with the city of Santa Cruz, we're looking at adaptation pathways, because all these things that I mentioned, they could happen at different times. So we're looking for triggers to adaptation. So when do we do what? So if we want to maybe add a little bit more sand to the beach for the next 20, 30 years, when do we do that? Maybe when the beach is like narrower or up to a length, or maybe when sea levels are at a specific place, or maybe the rates are increasing, and then you do that. And then 20 years later, when something else happens, you move on to the next phase on your adaptation process. So we applied for a couple of grants. We didn't get them yet, but one of the ideas is to choose a coastal location, a specific place, and go through those different adaptation features to help people understand the trade-offs between them, right? Because all of these things cost a lot of money. Someone's got to pay for it, and that's we can ask Luba. She teaches the second half of the sustainable coastal management. It's all about who pays for these things, and I hand off the baton to her because that's too hard of a question for me to fathom.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Peter, if you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really great talk. My question is actually on community engagement. When you're building relationships with these cities, because you're dealing with very salient issues and you're talking directly with the residents and trying to build these programs, are you mostly like through your network of partners identifying cities that already have efforts that are in line with the services and tools and initiatives that you can create? Or are you looking to partner with cities that are a little bit more neutral, let's say, in their opinions, and then trying to sort of offer them these tools in a sense of saying, hey, if you go in this direction, look at these really great things you'll have access to?
So great questions. Thank you, Peter. We typically, so far, we've been working with the communities that are already talking about adaptation, or at least have gone through some sort of vulnerability assessment to look at some of the risks. But we're basically, we'll work with anyone that's interested in advancing that conversation, right? We went through great lengths to reduce costs and democratize those tools as much as we can. So I do think it's important, even if you're going to start from, you don't have that base, to identify what that could look like. When the project in Long Beach, that was a conversation that wasn't happening. And then Jerry, the Shubo, had this idea, like, we need to talk more about this. And he convened like the community. And then we lagged a little bit when they were ready to see some of the visuals based on the conversations. We brought that in, but we're open. I mean, I really like working and learning about new communities and getting to know the local folks. You learn a lot from them. I really went from, oh yeah, you live on the coastline, you should do this, and to like, I don't live there. What do I know? I mean, you really need to listen to the folks at that community and see and help them figure that out and give them some tools. But it's ultimately, it's going to be up to them, right, to really decide. I think a lot of these adaptation options are happening at the local level. It's great to have federal and state support. We're very fortunate here in California. We're pledging billions of dollars for coastal adaptation in the next few years, right? But not all places are like that. And we have some places here in California, we still have some time. We have to act now, but it's not like sea levels are, at our doorsteps everywhere. There's some low-lying areas. But you go to the East Coast and some of the places on the Gulf Coast where they're already, in need to either move away or do something right now. So hopefully that answered the question.
Great. Let's see who is up next. I believe that's Mallory. Yes, Mallory.
Okay. So because we know that sometimes there's a gap between awareness of an issue and action on an issue, I'm just curious if you've kept any data from after people go through the experience, maybe specifically the sea level rise, because I know not all of them are released yet, and how much more likely they are to take some kind of substantial political action for environmental protections.
I'm I'm dying to do that. Unfortunately, not yet, Mallory. We did a little quick survey with the Santa Cruz crew, for the project. Basically, we have 3 questions. And do you agree with the options that you're seeing? To what extent? And rate your awareness increase of sea level rise. But that call to action that I put in for me and Anna does a lot of social sciences studies around that. So we're really interested in doing that. And a couple of the things that happened that I was very happy to see was that a couple of the universities actually picked up some of these tools and they're using them as class activities. And I got quotes from students and it's been really heartwarming, but also like seeing how it's getting used out there. And there is a master's student at San Jose State that's actually going to use the sea level rise Santa Cruz on an experiment at the Beach Flats neighborhood to see how that increases engagement of Latinx community here in the city with sea level rise. And that has a component of long-term engagement. The folks at Stanford, they did one experiment when they were tracking. They have a great ocean acidification experience when you learn all about it and you go around and you put flags into the healthy corals and you count things. And they found some interesting things. One was that with the headset, you can measure how much people are moving. And the folks that moved more when trying that experience retain more knowledge. Just like this idea of full body learning, right? It was fantastic. I was like, this is great. They also, when they show the video in VR and a 360 video online, just like the wildfire. And for that, they didn't see a different rate in short-term learning right after that. But when they went back, and I think a couple of weeks later, they interviewed the same folks, they found that the VR increased their sense of self-efficacy. So how they feel more confident and more competent to talk and deal with the issues by seeing things in VR. So it's all kind of emerging, but it's just fascinating to me how it kind of taps into things in your brain that other media doesn't. There's functional MRI that they do with folks in VR, and the parts of the brain that light up are the same parts when you're seeing the real thing, right? So you can really immerse people. And using this technology, we can put them in a forest fire, which is not ideal, but some people, the goal is to bring that to, we didn't get there yet, but that's part of the plan, is to bring that to Sacramento, to some of the policymakers, and say, hey guys, look at this. We need several $1 million here to address some of these issues, or you can wait for another campfire, which it will happen, I'm afraid to say, but it costs billions of dollars to recover. So those could be also decision-making tools that, but it's already starting. So it's super exciting, but I wish I had more data on some of those things, right? But we'll work hard to get them.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for asking.
I've got Maddie S, followed by, Maddie S, and then go ahead, Maddie.
Thank you, Professor. It was great hearing you talk today. Those videos, I seriously got chills watching them, and I never had experienced, a virtual reality like that. And it was just incredible. My question is regarding, going to these local communities and talking to them about sea level rise, and how, we know that it's pretty much locked into the system, that if we stop burning fossil fuels today, that the sea level will continue to rise for centuries. How do you have that conversation with people, who live right there on the ocean, and that, they could put a seawall up, they could do the sand dunes, but really they don't stand a chance against what is against them. So how do you go about having that conversation with people?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the community. I don't think that we ever done it the same twice. I think like in Long Beach, it was all about, we had 2 hearing sessions where we were bringing the folks, they invited them to this conversation, and it's like, well, let's talk about this. Let's, what do you think? What do you know about this issue? What do you think we should do? So it's more like it started as this hearing session and all of that. In Turner Station, there was an interesting story because the way we set up, it was a community event. We had there was an architecture firm that's working with the hardware with a vision for the park. So they had this elevated as a wood model, like a diorama. It was really interesting. So we had folks go there first, talk to them, understand the project, the problem, see that there were solutions being discussed, and then they went to our table and looked at the headsets and could experience and see some of the impacts, but also see virtual renderings of what that could look like, some of the solutions. So I think having someone that they can talk to is important, having a local trusted member. This was a community event, and Turner Station is an amazing community. I mean, everyone knows each other. You walk around the neighborhood, you see this old ladies picking up the trash every afternoon. I mean, it's like we're all kind of fell in love with that. I was like, oh, I want to live here now, except it floods a lot, but it was a great place. And then everyone knows each other. And Larry, who is the narrator, and Gloria, the leaders there, they bring people in and they talk to them. But we did have this one lady that she jumped the queue. She didn't want to wait. She's like, oh, I want to see this, show me. She grabbed the headset, started going through, and she freaked out. I mean, if you, that NPR story, they actually recorded her freaking out, which is not great for our PR, but it's what happens, right? And that out of that came this need to, we need to engage with, psychologists here, someone that if there's trauma, how do we deal with this? Because it could be triggering to some folks, right? But that lady, it turned out she had been through a pretty traumatic flood event herself. So when she saw the waters coming up, she just freaked out and took it out. And we don't even do this ground views, right? Some people ask, oh, can you show what it's like from the street when the waters get to your head? It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. We don't want to scare them. We just want to give them a real sense of what's happening. but it's different everywhere. I think it's important to have someone that they trust. Have someone that they can talk to. That woman that freaked out, we spent about 40 minutes talking to her after that. She's all right. But when that thing came out on the radio, I got, I think 4 or 5 emails, interestingly, from yoga teachers that heard the story, and they were like, "Whoa, it sounded like she was triggered. What did you guys do? Or how you manage that?" So I think with great care, and we're learning as we go too, to some extent. But I talked to a friend as a psychologist, and I talked to him about this, and he goes, "Juliano, great that you're worried about this, but people get triggered with all kinds of stuff. You could see something on TV. You have to take care and be aware of this, but you can't prevent it, right? That's part of their process too. So we try to the best we can."
I think our last 2 questions will be Emily, and then Luba, you'll cap us off.
Hey, thanks. I'll keep it short. I really enjoyed your presentation, especially about the level of sea rise. I'm from North Carolina, so that's a huge issue out like in the Outer Banks. And I just had a little bit of a question again about how you choose the project. So do these communities reach out to you, or do you send out like information to a lot of different communities and see who responds, or kind of like how do these projects get chosen?
So all of them have been, we started with Santa Cruz because I live here. I was working with Santa Cruz on a project where we're trying to add social vulnerability to their climate adaptation plan. And that's when we first found that Beach Flats neighborhood was the most socially vulnerable, but also on the path of, first flooding, like really front line. So we started that way. And then when I had this idea of maybe we could do 3D models from drones and put it in VR, I didn't know what to do with it. So I met my business partner, who is like the tech guru and does a lot of the stuff. And then I reached out to Tiffany Wise West. She's the director here at the city. She's a great resource. Very lucky to have her here. She's a climate hero. And she was working on, I think they're a climate action and adaptation director now. And then I knocked on her door. "Hey, Tiffany, I had this idea. Would you use this? Or what do you think?" And she's like, "Oh, this is great. Let's, So they helped us to co-develop that. And then we didn't even have funds at the time. We're doing this on nights and weekends. And then they applied for a grant that funded the first project. And then Turner Station came in. But all the projects so far have been through word of mouth. We haven't yet called people. We're just starting to do that now that we feel that we're a place where we could handle multiple projects, and it's more affordable too. So we're just now starting to reach out to some folks, right? I think this is the second meeting or presentation that I actually asked for folks, and we got a couple takers, so we'll see where it leads us. But we're open. I mean, we'll work with anyone, I think, as long as it's just a matter of scheduling and time. And also we work with any budget, so we're not too worried about, making a lot of money. It's more for getting this out there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for talking about that.
Thank you. Hey, Luba.
Hey, wonderful to see all this great stuff. Just one word of caution: be careful when you do things and say this is the biggest wildfire in California history, because within months it may be superseded. Just
right. Yeah.
But my question, maybe just to wrap it up, is about the sort of emerging field of climate adaptation as a professional field. Mm-hmm. And thinking about, students here, we're teaching in the OCRM specialization, but also elsewhere on coastal climate management. It seems like there's a lot of, this is an exploding area, and our students, I think, are particularly well positioned for jobs in this communication space, helping communities just access the risk options, seeing it clearly. And I wonder if you might just talk a little bit about how you see that and what kind of positioning our students could do for jobs in that field.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Luba. And we talk quite a bit about this. I think this timing is amazing, right? With all the funds and like you said, this field is really exploding. So, and with the Middlebury network, I'm sure folks will, end up in great places. I think a couple of things that I suggest, and I think you probably heard this many times, but I think it's good, is like try to find out what kind of positions you're looking for and reach out people that are in those positions and talk to them and learn about them and how they got there, and start creating, that network as soon as you can. The other thing I worry a little bit, and that's part of why I decided to end up doing what I'm doing, which is, it's a tough career, right? It's a tough issue, and the news are not great, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But we need everyone. We need all your talents, but we need you to stick with it to the long run, right? So burnout is real. I really, encourage everyone to have your personal resilience plan. Part of my personal strategy on that is I love technology. I love toys. I like drones. So I figure out, is there a way to do all the stuff that I really like to deal with this difficult issue? So I think look, inside, find those things that you're passionate about, and then start looking for positions that could allow you to explore that. Sometimes, the specific position that you end up at is not as important as what you're going to be doing, right? So when I was going through that process after grad school, I kind of thought to myself, what is important to me? And I come up with a little list, maybe flexible time, but also a challenge, intellectual challenge, technology. And then I started looking for positions that would allow me to work with those things. And I was lucky and privileged enough that it worked out. But I think just, look out for folks that are in those areas. Also, I always like to keep an eye on trends, things that have been done a million times. Look for what's new, what's coming down the pipe that could make you, give you that little advantage. And look for new data sets, and I always talk about data and things, and new tools that are out there that maybe other folks don't know yet. That will give you that little edge. But yeah, I don't know, I think that's my 2 cents there.
Hey, great, thanks, Juliano. I think that's a good way to kind of wrap it up, and I think a lot of the students who are not in your class yet will get your wisdom next fall when they graduate to the second year. So thanks so much for giving us a flavor for this. It seems like it's really expanding, and I really love how you've kind of, like you said, you've democratized it, and you're really just trying to get it out there. And kind of like Mallory, I'm really curious, one of the first things I say in class is more information doesn't lead to activism, right? And so we know that there's other mechanisms. Yours is a beyond just data and stats, like those charts you showed us. You're certainly taken to the next level, but what are those final points that get people to make tough decisions, right? I think we all need to know a lot more about that. And so I'm really going to be excited to see when you have a little bit more data on how this stuff is actually influencing political decisions and planning decisions and stuff. Yeah, so thank you all so much for being with us. Have a great rest of the evening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.